Welcome back to Indiana Hoosiers Live. This is the second edition. We had last week as the first edition of Indiana Hoosiers Live, and this is our second week going. And Indiana football, they're looking really good so far this season, just like they did last week when I was recapping the Charlotte game when they were 4-0 and they were on the fringes of being in the AP Top 25 poll. A lot of people were excited about Indiana then, but even more people are excited about Indiana now because they are 5-0 on the season, and they are ranked in the top 25 poll. We're going to get into all of that and more in this show, but appreciate everybody for stopping by so far, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot more people come in as the show goes on. Really appreciate it a lot, but the Indiana Hoosiers, it's the perfect time to have an Indiana Hoosier live stream on the Voice of College Football, and we're also debuting the Indiana Hoosiers channel as well. Indiana at the Voice of College Football is a brand new channel. Definitely, if you guys would like to go check that out and subscribe, we'll definitely be promoting it throughout the show. But Indiana, big game against the Maryland Terrapins, helping to move to 5-0 on the season. Let's go ahead and recap that game. The Maryland Terrapins were 3-1 coming into playing Indiana, who was undefeated, and they were going on the road. And Indiana has had a lot of struggles with Maryland the last few years. They've lost the last 3 games against the Maryland Terrapins. But Tom Allen, those were the final 3 years of the Tom Allen era. So Indiana was really struggling. They were not having a lot of success in any capacity those final 3 seasons. So Maryland had been getting the best of Indiana, but not in this past game. Indiana knocked off the Maryland Terrapins 42-28 last week, and that helped Indiana move to 5-0 on the season and 1 win away from bowl eligibility, which is a big deal for Indiana because a lot of people would say, well, Indiana, making a bowl game, that's not that big a deal. That's not impressive. Indiana hasn't won a bowl game since 1991, and even though they've made several bowl games in the past decade, they haven't won any of them. They've lost all of them in heartbreaking fashion. So Indiana not really that used to making bowl games, not rarely ever winning them. So it would be a big deal for Indiana to start the season out 6-0 if they can win their next game, which we're going to be previewing their next opponent and predicting them later on in the show. But it's a big deal for Indiana. And Maryland was not an easy team to beat either. I mean, Indiana was favored by 7, but that was only because of the fact that Indiana had started the season out so impressively with all the wins that they have had, destroying Western Illinois, beating UCLA by over 4 touchdowns on the road. That was very impressive. So none of that was easy to do at all. So definitely when you talk about the fact that Indiana beating Maryland at home by 14 points, and really it could have been a whole lot more, it's definitely impressive. And the reason why I say it could have been by a whole lot more is because of the fact that Indiana had a couple plays in this game that did not go in their favor. You talk about Maryland, there was a play where the receiver for the Maryland Terrapins, his backside hit the out-of-bounds line. And the commentators were like, well, half of his backside was inbounds, so it counts. That counts. And that was on like a 3rd and 17. It kept Maryland's drive alive. And they ended up scoring a touchdown on that drive on a crazy play that definitely shouldn't have happened. It was bobbled in the air like 5 times after Indiana deflected in the end zone. So Maryland scored on that play. And then there was another play where the referee blocked D'Angelo Pons. I don't know if he did it on purpose, but man, it almost felt like it was intentional. A well-timed block by the referee into D'Angelo Pons, which allowed the running back for Maryland to run for 75 yards. That was 14 points that you could say the referees aided in. So Indiana could have probably won by 3 or 4 touchdowns. But at the end of the day, none of that really matters. Indiana won, and they won convincingly. But it's just to preface, if you didn't watch the game, Indiana could have won by more. So that's crazy right there. That's actually a good sign for Indiana, in my opinion, that there were a lot of things that actually aided Maryland, and Indiana was still able to get a win by as much as they did. Plus, also in the fact that Indiana had 4 turnovers. Indiana finally did not play a mistake-free game. Last week, I told all you guys that Indiana had not turned the football over once this season, which is insane that they went 4 games into the season without a turnover. That hasn't happened for Indiana like in a long time. And most teams have already had a turnover at least once or twice. A lot of even the best teams in college football have done that. So definitely crazy for Indiana they didn't have a turnover. But I said that Indiana was probably going to turn it over against Maryland. And they did 4 times. And in most games, you do not win if you turn it over 4 times. Rourke had 2 picks. Now, granted, both those picks, you can maybe blame a bit on the receivers a little bit because of the fact one of them, Miles Price, just stopped running down the field and Rourke overthrew Price. It was picked off very easily by the Maryland defender. But at the same time, if Price kept running, maybe it wouldn't have been picked. And then on the other pick, Keyshawn Williams is doing a crossing route. When you do a crossing route, you're supposed to cut back in toward the quarterback. He did not. Okay, so that's kind of, you can't really blame Curtis Rourke there. He did not cut back in on the route, and the Maryland defender ended up jumping the route and picking the ball off. It is what it is. I mean, I guess you can say Rourke shouldn't have thrown it, but when he let go of the ball, he probably didn't know Keyshawn Williams wasn't going to cut back to the football. So I kind of don't really blame that on Curtis Rourke all that much. It is frustrating because I do believe that Rourke has been playing fantastic this season, and him not having any interceptions on the year was just so impressive. But now he's got 2, but his stats are still looking really good, and he's actually on the fringes of the Heisman race. He's not going to win it. I mean, Indiana would have to have a great season, and he would have to put up insane stats to have a shot. But the fact he's in the Heisman conversation, even now after 2 picks, is pretty impressive. He also had a fumble in the game. Didn't like to see that from Rourke either. He did have a fumble. That was frustrating. And a running back for Indiana, Kalen Black, one of their third or fourth string running backs, had a fumble as well. So, not one of their better running backs. But Indiana definitely had a mistake-filled game. Not a mistake-free game in any way, shape, or form. But they were still able to win comfortably. You could say the rain might have contributed as well because Hurricane Helene, and again, prayers to Florida, North Carolina, Georgia with Hurricane Helene. It is a disaster. Tons of deaths. It is really sad what's going on there. So definitely want to pray for them. But absolutely, when you talk about the fact that there was a lot of rain and some wind in that game against Maryland that made the weather really rough for both teams. It was actually impressive that both Maryland and Indiana had as good of an offensive day as they did, especially Indiana. They were pretty flawless outside of the 4 turnovers. And that's why they were able to win 42-28. Like I said, could have been by more, but at the end of the day, it does not matter for Indiana getting a very comfortable win over the Maryland Terrapins. Now Maryland's on, the verge of maybe missing a bowl game. They're 3-2, but 0-2 in the Big Ten, and arguably losing 2 of their more winnable games, losing to Indiana, losing to Michigan State. Now they got a lot of tough games coming up on their schedule, so maybe the Terps might miss a bowl game for the first time in 4 years, and a team that they've really been able to count on getting a win against lately has been Indiana, and aiding in their quest of making all those bowl games because they've beaten Indiana 3 out of the last 4 years, and all 4 of those years they made a bowl game. So Indiana is one of those games they normally win. Indiana making sure that did not occur. Indiana making sure that they were not going to let Maryland get the best of them this time. So that's a big deal for Indiana, showing the improvement of Curt Cignetti's squad. Jackson, we got him in the chat. Appreciate it. Jack says, what's up, Hoosier Nation? Sports Talk with All says, what's up? Appreciate that as well. Aaron Taylor says, Indiana looks legit. Absolutely. Appreciate you for stopping by as well. Indiana playing very good football. I am impressed with the Hoosiers. The real MVP, appreciate you for stopping by. So did you see that Indiana has a 40% chance to make the playoffs according to ESPN? I did see that. I know the FBI predictor's not all that accurate, but after the win over Maryland, Indiana has a 40% chance to make the playoffs, according to the FBI predictor. We're definitely going to be talking about that more as the season goes along, especially if Indiana continues to win, and that becomes more of a legit possibility. I'm not getting too high on that. Just because Indiana beat Maryland does not mean to me that they're ready to be in the playoff conversation. But yes, I'm absolutely thrilled about the fact that Indiana is getting respect, that they actually are being considered for the playoff, that the fact that they're ranked right now, which is insane. All of this stuff is great for Indiana football, and I think it's only going to continue. If Curt Cignetti can continue to have Indiana focused, they don't let the rat poison get to them. That's been thrown around, kind of like what Nick Saban used to say. Curt Cignetti used to be a coach, assistant coach under Nick Saban, so he has a lot of his philosophies, and they're winning philosophies. Absolutely. Don't let the rat poison get to you. You just got to continue to focus. You haven't made it yet. Indiana, even though they're ranked, they haven't made it yet. That is a big deal for Indiana to be ranked, and it's a big deal to start out 5-0 for the first time since 1967. I haven't even mentioned that either. Indiana is 5-0 for the first time since 1967. I know they haven't beat anybody too good, but if this was Tom Allen, they would not be 5-0 right now. So it's very impressive. Maryland is not a bad team at all whatsoever, and Indiana handled business. They handled the game, and really not any point in the game that I thought Indiana was going to lose. ZV Wrestling, appreciate you for stopping by. He does say when Hemby got that touchdown run where the ref blocked Pons, I thought Maryland would take the game from us. I will say I was a bit nervous when that happened, ZV Wrestling, but I never thought the game was over. I didn't think Indiana was toast when that happened, but I do agree with you. Was a little bit concerned. It was a bit scary for Indiana when that happened. I thought maybe is this the Tom Allen Indiana from the last 3 years? Are they going to blow it? Are they going to let a early lead collapse on them and they're going to blow the game? That did not happen. Indiana getting a big win, starting out 5-0 over a solid Maryland squad. Do not overlook Maryland. They're not a bad team. They might get somebody later on down the schedule, and they're probably going to have to if they want to make a bowl game for the 5th straight season. But Indiana did not let the Maryland Terrapins get to him, did not let all those turnovers get to him, and that shows you that Curt Cignetti has changed the culture, helping lead Indiana to their first 5-0 start since 1967. But a big reason why they won that Maryland game was not just the players. Remember last week, I talked about Indiana's crowd. Indiana's home crowd has been an issue, definitely. They've not had a lot of fans. Remember how embarrassing that was? There was barely any fans in the stadium. Well, Curt Cignetti is absolutely thrilled with what he saw, the response from the Indiana fans. Despite the weather, he said on Twitter, love the crowd, like our team, let's do better. And look at that crowd. There's a few empty seats. There's a few empty seats on the top right and the top left over here, but almost all of the seats were filled for this game. So the stadium holds 52,000 people, and I think there was reported close to 49,000. So it was almost full capacity with bad weather and Indiana not being a football school and their fans don't care about the team. Well, they care now because Curt Cignetti, he's making them care. He's making them want to show up because there's high-quality football, number one. And plus, Curt Cignetti, he did a full email to the student body last week. After I did the live stream last week talking about previewing the Maryland game, Curt Cignetti did an email to the entire student body telling them that you need to show up. You need to show up and show out for this game. Like, don't even study. Like, I want you to study, but do not even study. Do not even go to a party or tailgate, all that kind of stuff. We need you in the stadium helping our team out. And they did. They showed out. It was a great crowd for Indiana. And I think that if Indiana can continue to win, there might be some sellouts in the future this season. Nebraska's coming up down the road. If that game's a sellout, that's going to help out Indiana's atmosphere. And you also have Michigan on the schedule at home as well. Purdue, even though Purdue hasn't looked all that good, still Indiana's rival. Indiana struggled with Purdue the past few seasons. That crowd needs to help out Indiana's players. They need to help out, just the entire atmosphere, the vibe. Get the players juiced up, because when you have a loud crowd, even maybe when you're not playing all that well, it can rattle the other team. And Indiana has been known as an easy place to play for a long time, a lot of their history, because a lot of times either their fans have nothing to cheer about because they're losing, or their fans don't even show up at all. And there's a lot of empty seats. That's not a good home environment. But Indiana's home environment is improving brick by brick, piece by piece, every single game. Every single game that Indiana has played this season, there have been more fans in the stadium. It is building. It is growing. And that's what winning does. When you win and you have success, even if Indiana is a basketball school, it does not matter. The fans are going to show up for Indiana football if you give them a reason to. If you give them a reason. I mean, how did all the best teams in college football build their stadiums to the point where they have 100,000 fans? People wanted to go. People wanted to be at the games because they care about the team. Alabama, Texas A&M, all these big teams. Indiana football, yeah, they got a small stadium. It's because there's never been any interest for them to build a bigger stadium. Why build a 80,000, fan stadium capacity when there's no one there showing up? If Indiana football, I'm not saying they're ever going to build the stadium and make it huge or anything, but I mean, if you continue to have success, and this is what Curt Cignetti is trying to do at Indiana, if you continue to have success, the people will come. They're not going to want to come for terrible football. Nebraska is a unique situation. I've said this tons of times. Nebraska is a unique situation. And the fact that their fans will show up no matter what. They also have a history too. Tom Osborne built that program. All those national championships that he had. And yeah, people say there's not much else to do in Nebraska, but there's not a lot else to do in some other states too, that there's not a lot of great college football being played and there's not a lot of fans. Nebraska is a unique situation. The fans in that state care about the team and the history that they had, and they want Nebraska to get back there. And that's why they still show up. They still care. They have been selling out that place for 50 years. It is insane. They have over 400 sellouts in a row. I mean, there's been a few games where they've gotten close to not selling it out, and like they've made sure it's sold out. That's how dedicated Nebraska fans are. And once they start winning again, they're going to keep selling it out. But that's the thing with Indiana. They just don't have that fan interest like Nebraska does. Indiana basketball does. Even when they're horrible, they still sell out. Even when they're bad, they still have fans showing up. It just unfortunately does not happen for Indiana football, but I do think it's going to happen in the future if Curt Cignetti stays with this program for the long haul. I mean, I know it's very early to talk about extension, and I'm not going to get into that here because we're going to be talking about that probably later in the season, have its own segment. But Indiana needs to hold on to Curt Cignetti, and if he continues to deliver with the way that he has delivered so far, the fans are going to show up. In that environment, I mean, it's not going to be Penn State. It's not going to be Ohio State. It's not going to be Michigan. And I'm never going to expect it to be as good as those teams. Those teams have fantastic fan bases, a big stadium, loud atmospheres. Even though some people say wine and cheese on some of those, some people even said that about Indiana, like a lot of wine and cheese fans. Me and Will and D talked about wine and cheese fans on my YouTube channel, Only Talk Sports, a few days ago. I don't like the wine and cheese fans. Oh, you can't stand up. Like, come on. Like, you're at a football game. You're supposed to be loud. You're supposed to be standing up. And Indiana, like when I watch them on TV, in football, I normally don't hear the crowd. I don't. Like, they're usually like an afterthought. Like, a lot of times you can almost hear the music over the fans. Like, you can hear what's playing in the background over the fans clearly. Well, I was watching this game on TV, Indiana playing Maryland this past Saturday, and I heard the crowd. It, again, wasn't one of the best in college football. It wasn't like Alabama when they played Georgia. That crowd was nuts. But right here, Indiana's crowd made a big impact in this game. Absolutely, they did. And it's going to continue in the future if they keep winning. Curt Cignetti stays. It's a big deal. Absolutely. Jeff says, howdy, Only Talk Sports. I'm here. Appreciate that, Jeff. G Bama boy. Appreciate you for stopping by. Roll Tide, y'all. Absolutely. Big win for the Crimson Tide over Georgia. But Indiana getting a big win over Maryland, and their crowd was a big reason why. I mean, I'm not saying Maryland was like uber rattled by the crowd. I'm not going to go out there and say that Indiana's crowd is now one of the most formidable in college football, but it's definitely not a weak link. Especially in this game. It's not a weak link anymore. It's been a weak link for a long time. But that's not going to be an issue. That's not going to be a problem for Indiana in the future if Curt Cignetti continues to have them win. I mean, this crowd was really solid for Indiana football. And I'm excited to see it. I'm absolutely excited to see it. I like seeing teams that don't normally have success and teams that don't normally have fan interest get fan interest. Yeah, you don't really want bandwagon fans. You don't want fans that are like, oh, I never cared about that team when they're losing, and now that they're winning, they do care. You want people that in the background, like they love Indiana. They like Indiana a lot. It's hard to support a team when they're trash. I get it. It's 110% okay. Very hard to support a team that's no good. But you don't have any reason to not support this team if you are in the state of Indiana. And I know you might even be a Notre Dame fan throughout history. Like, you like Indiana basketball, you like Notre Dame football. I get that, but you have no reason not to support this team. And what's so awesome about Curt Cignetti is how he is like he's thanking the fan base. He's responding. He even emailed the entire student body after the game saying thank you. Now go study. Made sure to throw that in there. Now you got to go study. But he thanked them for this because of the fact that that's what he wants to see. I think that might keep Cignetti in Indiana longer, maybe for the rest of his career, if you just continue to see this forward momentum. You don't want it to stall. You don't want to be like, well, we did all we could do in Indiana. We tried to build it as much as we could, but you know what? The fans just didn't really care. Didn't really happen. We just couldn't really build this thing. We did the best we could, but it's done. Like, we maxed it out. You don't want that. Indiana, continue to improve. Like he said, let's do better. That Maryland game, that's not even the best that Cignetti wants to see. That's not even the best that I think Indiana is even capable of based on what we've seen. Indiana had a lot of mistakes against Maryland, still comfortably beat them. They absolutely, could have won by more, but it was a comfortable win. And it's just impressive that you're seeing Indiana in all aspects get better and better. The crowd is getting better. The team's getting better. Curt Cignetti's trying to do everything he can to get better. But the crowd getting better is so important because that's a byproduct of winning. That's going to continue to happen week by week until you start seeing sellouts, even not against big opponents. Like, it will be impressive for Indiana to have sellouts against Nebraska and Michigan later on down the season. That will be impressive. Hope that happens. It should happen, especially if Indiana's still doing very well at that point. But you want to start seeing like next year, Indiana playing a bad team in the non-conference. That's a sellout. That's what you want to see. It's going to take a long time maybe for Indiana to get to that point, but that's how you build the fan interest. It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. But I think Indiana's getting there because I was not expecting the fans to be this good with the amount of rain and bad weather that Indiana had with Hurricane Helene. And again, prayers to everybody dealing with that. It is a horrific situation. But despite the weather and the adversity, Indiana overcame and won this game. And the crowd was a big deal. And Curt Cignetti, very grateful for it. And that is such a nice thing to see.
College football is even more exciting with some action on the line. And the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Let's start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread. I've got a 40-year track record. In fact, in 2023, at $100 played per game, you would have netted over $9,300. And guess what? I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill, our ace in the hole, show stopper from Wager Talk. 6 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick, which went 21-5 against the spread the last 2 seasons. I repeat, 21-5 against the spread. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Steve Dace and Matt Zemek. Become a YouTube channel member or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2024 a winner now.
So up next, our next segment of the show is that Indiana's ranked. And I know that, again, for most teams, that's not a big deal. That's not a big deal at all. But for Indiana, it's a big deal. Because when you talk about the fact that Indiana's rarely ever ranked, and you also talk about the fact that Indiana's the losingest Power 4 program in the history of college football. I guess the Power 5 still exists. The Pac-12 still hanging on, trying to resurrect its conference, even though the way that it ended, it really shouldn't be. But Indiana, the losingest Power 4/Power 5 team of all time, they're not ranked very often. They're rarely ever ranked. And they're ranked. They're in the top 25 poll. And I know people say polls don't matter. Well, at this point in the season, they do matter because it shows you that you're having success. Look at Florida State. They started the season ranked. They're not ranked anymore. They don't deserve to be ranked anymore because they're not good. So Indiana being ranked, absolutely a big deal. AP poll, 23rd. Coaches poll, 24th. I feel like Indiana, I feel like they're a top 20 team right now, the way that they're playing, but they're not ranked there yet. And that's okay, because even though a lot of people don't believe in Indiana yet, that's fine. Like I said, you want people to wait on warming up to you. You don't want them just to fall in love with you immediately. Like, oh, Indiana's a great team. Everybody all over the major networks is saying how awesome Indiana is. Don't do that. I'm okay with that. Let Indiana just continue to build slowly but surely. Because at the end of the day, what really matters is the CFP rankings in the first place. And we'll see what happens. When the CFP rankings come out, if Indiana is ranked higher than they are in the AP poll, then that shows you right there that the CFP, the voters, the people in charge of that, think Indiana's a good team. And at the end of the day, that's what matters. And I feel like that the AP poll and the coaches poll will warm up to Indiana more so if they keep winning. Because, Indiana's schedule has been very soft. Not going to lie, it's been very soft, this season so far. And the Maryland win's probably their best win, even though a lot of people would say at UCLA because of the fact that going on the road and winning in the Rose Bowl, like for me, that was the win that made me the most thrilled for Indiana this season, was going on the road and winning at UCLA. But now that we know that UCLA is pretty bad, it does reduce, the shine on that win, even though for Indiana, it's a big deal. They've never won in the Rose Bowl. It doesn't matter how it was done. It doesn't matter that UCLA is garbage. It doesn't matter that UCLA is in the Big Ten now. It's a conference opponent. It's a big deal. But beating Maryland, probably their best win. And now they've squeaked into the top 25. And for Curt Cignetti, he doesn't care about this. He doesn't care about rankings. He's made that very obvious. He's saying that, it would have been okay if Indiana wasn't ranked this week. I'm happy to see them ranked. It just shows how much different Indiana is now. They're not the same old team that they were under Tom Allen those last 3 years. Because I can't stress enough that they did have their moment in the sun. They did have their moment in the sun with Tom Allen. The 2019 and 2020 seasons were great, and I enjoyed them. Michael Penix, Peyton Ramsey, had some good receivers, Nick Westbrook, Todd Freifogel, Watt Fillier. It was a fun time. Peyton Hendershot. I enjoyed those 2 years of watching Indiana, of being an Indiana football fan. It was a lot of fun, but it did feel short-lived. It did feel like once, it ran out with Penix and they didn't have the weapons around him, it was just going to run out. And yes, Hummus Hero, you're right. It's the first time that they're ranked since the beginning of 2021. But see, that's the thing. They didn't deserve to be ranked right at the beginning of the season that year because Indiana ended up being horrible. It's just because the preseason polls ranked Indiana based off how they finished last season in 2020 that year. Like, Indiana had a great 2020. So they're like, you know what? We'll rank them in 2021. And it was great that they were ranked. I was thrilled. I remember that Indiana-Iowa game. I'm like, man, this is going to be a fantastic game. I think Indiana's got a great shot. Yeah, it's going to be tough to win at Iowa. They got destroyed. But Michael Penix, he could just clearly tell. He was nowhere near, 100%. He was still injured off that ACL the previous season. And unfortunately, Indiana didn't have Peyton Ramsey to back it up. No Peyton Ramsey to come in for him. Yeah, Jack Tuttle, which Michigan fans know very well. I mean, Jack Tuttle just never lived up to his 4-star hype. But yeah, Indiana was ranked in 2021 at the beginning of the season. Last time they were ranked, but they were 2-10 that year. Absolutely terrible. Indiana didn't start this season ranked. You know what they were in the analytics polls? Like, S&P rated them at like the 81st team in college football. That's awful. The 81st team in college football? Like, I would have picked Indiana probably with all the transfers they got, Curt Cignetti's winning track record. I probably would have put him at like 58 or 60 or something, not 81. I think another ranking had him at like 77 at the beginning of the season. So everybody thought they were going to be bad. A lot of people were saying Indiana's going to go 3-9, which is hilarious in hindsight because even if Indiana loses every single game from here on out, which hopefully that doesn't happen, Indiana would still be 5-7, which will be a lot better than most people predicted at the beginning of the season. And it would also, it would be basically in line with what the betting odds had at the beginning of the season. The betting odds had Indiana winning like 5.5 games. So 5-7 will be about right. But why this is so significant is that, yeah, they were ranked at the beginning of 2021, but they earned this. Indiana earned this ranking. They had to earn it. They didn't start the season ranked like a lot of these, all the big teams start ranked, which I understand why they do because they have a lot of great players. They were great last year, so you're expecting to be great again. But you do see teams like Florida State that end up exposing themselves as terrible teams if they fall out of the rankings. But Indiana, nowhere near the top 25. And now they're ranked at number 23. Yeah, there's a few other teams you could say, hey, they should be ranked too. A lot of people are saying Rutgers. Rutgers is undefeated as well. But I think Indiana's been more impressive than Rutgers. Indiana has looked better than Rutgers, despite the fact that Rutgers is good. I think Rutgers is a legitimately good team. And if they keep winning, they got a big game coming up. If they win again, they'll be ranked. But sometimes it's good when no one believes in you because you can't fall into the rat poison, as Curt Cignetti would say. You can't fall into that. You earn that ranking. Indiana is now ranked as the 23rd team in college football. And the way that they've played, maybe I'm a little bullish now based on what I've seen. But I think Indiana might be better than that. Honestly, I think they might be better than the 2013. I think they might be a top 20 team in college football. But it doesn't matter. They're ranked now, and they got to continue to play like it. When they go play their next opponent that we'll be previewing later in the show, when they play them, they do not need to overlook that opponent, and they do not need to be like, hey, well, you know what? We're ranked now. The people believe in us, and we can lax up. No, you don't. Indiana needs to continue to play like they have been playing. If they do that, they will move up these rankings. They'll keep moving up. And what's so important with the way Indiana's playing, the way that they've looked, and how they've had this meteoric rise up the rankings from 81 to 23 is that I think the CFP rankings, if they keep winning, will rank them even higher. That's why people are saying they have such a great chance to make the playoff. The schedule, how they've looked, and the trajectory. I think that's going to matter more at the end of the day. There might be a few outliers in the polls. I know strength of schedule might bog them down, but Indiana does have some tough opponents coming up. And if they win those games, which, again, I'm not getting any ahead of that. I'm not projecting Indiana to make the playoff or do any of those things. Like I said, if they keep winning, we'll talk about that later in the season. But I do think they have the potential to be ranked higher than this. They're going to keep winning. They're going to keep having success if they keep playing the way that they have. What's helped them get here? That's what's such a big deal about this. Jim R saying they could go all of the way. Well, maybe a playoff entry. Hey, I mean, again, it's so premature. Absolutely premature, but it is possible, and that's what's insane. 1989 M said, hey, brother, Jeffrey at the helm. Appreciate that. Hummus Hero says Indiana offensively is now entered near the top 5 in basically every statistical category. It's not a fluke. And see, that's the point, Hummus Hero, right there. Yeah, they've played poor teams, but they've done what they're supposed to do. What any good opponent would do, like Ohio State or Alabama, you destroy bad teams. And you're going off statistics. Indiana's a top 10 team in college football based off statistics. But right now they're 23rd. That's why rankings are very subjective. They're not, I mean, all rankings are flawed. Even Mark Rogers, the top 25, it actually makes sense. He's even said that ranking is flawed, even though his ranking is way better than the AP top 25 poll. It's a lot more objective. It makes a whole lot more sense with the way he does it. You guys should go check out that if you've never watched it before, but I'm sure most of you guys have. Mark Rogers, top 25, it actually makes sense. It's fantastic, but it's still a flawed ranking. Every ranking is flawed. That's just the way that it works. But the AP poll is very flawed because you got a bunch of people that rank, teams that some of them probably don't even watch football that much. And if they do, they only watch like 2 games. Like a lot of us, we watch more football than the AP voters, a lot of them. So they're very flawed. They're still not high on Indiana yet. But again, doesn't matter. Indiana just needs to continue doing what they're doing. B says, appreciate you for stopping by. We'll see how good they are versus Nebraska. Maryland lost no one to Michigan State. UCLA struggle with Hawaii. I get it. Absolutely. I get it. Maryland, that's probably why a lot of people aren't ranking them higher. If they had a bigger win, like if they'd already beaten a Nebraska or something like that already, they'd be higher probably. But still, it doesn't matter. I'm just excited to see that Indiana's really great play is finally starting to pay off and that they finally got to sniff the top 25. They don't need to let it get to their head, though. Absolutely not. But definitely, before we segue to our next segment, do want to shout out that everybody go and subscribe to Indiana at the Voice of College Football at this link. Would really appreciate it if you did, because of the fact this show will be moving over to the Indiana channel eventually. Right now, it's still on the main channel. And definitely appreciate that all you guys are here. But if you guys go subscribe to Indiana at the Voice of College Football at this link right here and get that channel, get the subs up, I mean, everybody starts going over there. We'll have a fantastic community over there of Indiana fans and non-Indiana fans. If you're a Big Ten fan, absolutely. If you're a Big Ten fan or if you're just a fan of college football in general and you like hearing about Indiana, talk. We'll sometimes talk about other stuff as well, especially, when we get to like the playoff time and other stuff like that in the off season. I'll be talking about other stuff right now. Right now, we're really focusing on Indiana because they're doing really, really well. And it definitely, the show's just started, but we'll be talking about some other stuff, but 95% of it will be Indiana. But even if you're not an Indiana fan, definitely would really encourage you guys to go subscribe to the Indiana channel. It's got to have a lot of great content coming very, very soon. Mark Rogers has a lot of fantastic shows with a lot of different hosts. The main channel, trying to get the subs up on the main channel. You guys are doing a fantastic job. They're trying to get to 50,000 and beyond, but new shows are coming out. Ole Miss just launched. There's an Ole Miss channel now. That's a big deal. Ole Miss at the Voice of College Football. Go check out the Ole Miss channel. Missouri's about to be coming. Missouri I think the channel is already up on YouTube if you guys would like to go subscribe over there. But definitely the Indiana channel, one of the newest channels. We're almost at 30 subs. I think right now we're at 29 subs. Now we're at 32. Appreciate you guys for subscribing to Indiana at the Voice of College Football. Absolutely. Trying to get it to 50 and beyond. We'll be at 500 and 1,000 before you know it with all of your guys' support. Absolutely. And there's a lot of Indiana fans out there. I know a lot of people say, oh, Indiana, there's not a lot of fans for Indiana. There are. And that's why you're seeing more and more engagement. Indiana's social media numbers are going through the roof. People are following, if they're bandwagon fans, that's okay. Appreciate it. Definitely. They're starting to support the Indiana Hoosiers and definitely want to get those numbers up at the Indiana channel. But definitely appreciate it. I'm excited to see how Indiana is doing right now. They're playing very well. It's awesome to see. And definitely, you guys jump on the bandwagon. Be at the start of it, right? You don't want to do it at the end. You don't want to do it too late. You want to be at the forefront of it at the very beginning. You want to be one of the first subscribers to Indiana, the Voice of College Football. Even if you're a bandwagon fan, does not matter. I appreciate it. It just shows how far Indiana has come in just a few games. Curt Cignetti building up that interest, that now you have people actually interested in Indiana football, and we're going to get the Indiana channel to 50, 100, 500 subs before you know it. I really appreciate it. B says bandwagon is one of the losing teams in FBS history. I know they're not good. They're not good. Absolutely. I get it, but they're good right now. And hopefully Curt Cignetti will continue to keep them playing at a high level. But unfortunately, despite all the great news and the success of Indiana football, and everybody is excited about the Hoosiers if you're an Indiana fan, even people that aren't an Indiana fan, not everything has been good for Indiana football. There has been some bad news that's come out. Just came out today, breaking news. Donovan McCulley has entered the transfer portal. Indiana wide receiver Donovan McCulley is no longer a part of the Indiana Hoosiers football team, and this is sad to see because this is a new trend that is going on in college football right now. Because when you talk about the fact that there is the redshirt rule of if you play in 4 games and you do not play any more than that, then guess what happens? You can redshirt. And what people used to do, if you were like a backup and you didn't play a lot and you only played 4 games and you really weren't going to get on the field that much, then you would just get redshirted. That's just how it worked. You get redshirted, you play the next year. Well, now we got the portal. And in Donovan McCulley's case, I get it. He has 1 year of eligibility left, which was this year. He's only played in 4 games. So he has 1 year left now still, since he's not playing in any more games, because he missed the first game with an injury and he had played sparingly in the previous 4 games. And he is kind of low on the depth chart. I mean, Indiana's got a lot of great wide receivers right now. Absolutely. So when you talk about the fact that Indiana's wide receiver room is absolutely loaded, and Indiana literally just did like a post. They just did a post on Twitter. So absolutely, Mike Rotunda, definitely. Jackson probably will put the link in the chat again. It's actually further up. But yes, the Indiana channel is definitely it's on there. It's posted. Absolutely. I'm sure Jackson will get that. If not, I can try to pull it up real quick. But I appreciate you for wanting to subscribe. We want to get those numbers up. Absolutely. Want to get those numbers up for sure. But yes, the Indiana channel, it is live. It is on YouTube right now. We're at 32 subscribers. I really appreciate all you guys for subscribing so far. Jackson just posted it, and I'm going to post it again as well. Definitely trying to get those numbers up. Absolutely appreciate it. But and appreciate it, Frank. I see you in chat. Absolutely, Jeffrey's a great young man. You don't know how much I appreciate those words, Frank. You've been a long time viewer. I really appreciate it a lot. And I mean, your kind words are just so appreciative. I really appreciate it, Frank. Absolutely. We also got Doc P saying, Doogie Hughes, hello, Jeffrey, like Doogie Howser. That's funny. Appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, back to Donovan McCulley, though. I mean, I get why he decided to transfer, because you want to keep your eligibility. I understand it. It's just unfortunate because this is going to start happening more and more for more football teams. Even if you're a good player, like what hurts about this is that he's not a backup player. Because you look at right here, Indiana has 2 backups right here. Indiana linebacker Najee Logan and safety Tyreek McDaniel have entered the transfer portal as grad transfers. They both also entered the portal today. That's different because they weren't playing. They were backups. It does suck for depth because Indiana does not have as much depth on defense, which I am a bit concerned about. That is concerning. Indiana's depth on defense definitely is thinner than the offense. So losing those guys, even though they weren't playing, sometimes it's smart to stick it out. What if there's an injury to a starting guy? Then you could get thrust into a role. That's what I don't like right there. I do not like seeing that either, but I understand it from their point of view and the fact that they weren't playing right now at all. So transfer, retain your eligibility, and play somewhere else. Problem with McCulley is that last year he was their best receiver. He did fall down the depth chart this year because of an injury, but he could have been key for Indiana later on in the season. I'm not too worried about it, though. Is this a massive loss for Indiana? Yes. But is it going to massively hurt Indiana? No, I don't think it will, because the lucky thing for IU is that their wide receiver room is the deepest on the team. Very deep. So many talented receivers. Elijah Surratt, Miles Price, Miles Cross. You also have Keyshawn Williams, Omar Cooper. Indiana's receiver room is going to be fine. It stinks for McCulley. losing McCulley because he was a key part of it. And it also stinks for McCulley, too, because actually it does stink for him because now he's not going to be a part of this great team. And that's what, for me, I mean, I know I'm not a player. I'm not an athlete. But if I was, and I was a part of this could be one of the most special teams in Indiana history, especially after McCulley has been a part of the team for 4 years. I don't know, man. I think I would have tried to stuck it out, in my opinion. But he's got to do what he's got to do. He wants to be an NFL player. He wasn't getting on the field. Curt Cignetti, he preaches. You got to do your job to get the ball. And that's what Indiana football tweeted. That's what I was saying before I started reading comments. Appreciate you guys a lot for being here. But absolutely, you talk about the fact that Curt Cignetti, he's not Tom Allen. He's not Tom Allen. The fact, like, you won your job. No matter how bad you are, you're going to keep your job. Like, McCulley was Indiana's leading receiver last year, didn't even play this year. An injury was part of it at first, but still, like Cignetti, he wants you to do your job. You're going to get benched. You're not going to play if you don't do well. And McCulley, he actually called him out in spring. During the spring game, Donovan McCulley didn't do all that good. And Cignetti was like, no, this is not what I want to see from you, man. You got to do better than that. Cignetti is showing a standard. He's got a standard. If you don't meet that standard, you're not going to play. And it's unfortunate. McCulley was a big-time recruit that Indiana got at first a few years ago in the Tom Allen era. He was a 4-star quarterback. He switched to wide receiver after his freshman year. Has a lot of potential still. Even though he's an older guy, I think he could maybe be an NFL receiver one day. But it does suck. It's not going to be in Indiana for the rest of his career. And not this season because Indiana, even though they got a lot of great receivers, he would have added to the depth. It's unfortunate. I think Indiana, they didn't really tweet it much because they were like really, really backups. But Indiana, I think, has lost about 7 players to the portal. And a lot of other teams have too. So just watch out for this trend. See how this trend, keeps going on year after year. How more players after like 4 or 5 games or so during the season just up and say, I'm entering the portal now. I'm no longer a part of the program because I want to retain my eligibility. I mean, I don't know how that works with NIL. I mean, my thing is, I don't know how NIL works. I'm not going to say I'm an NIL expert, but you got Donovan McCulley here. He's got an NIL deal at Indiana because he's a good player, and he was thought to be one of their best players this year at the beginning of the season. How's that work? Now he enters the portal. Does his NIL deal just end? Does it stop? Is it over with? I don't know. I don't know how that works. I mean, does he continue to get all of his NIL? I don't know how that works, but that's going to just be something interesting to see. I mean, you saw it with Sluka at UNLV. Everybody remembers Matthew Sluka, how he just up and said, I'm leaving UNLV because he said something about he didn't get compensated fairly or something like that. So now the backup quarterback, he's been better than Sluka at UNLV after 1 game. We have to see more from him to see if he actually is better. But luckily for UNLV, they're not being affected by him transferring. But it's going to hurt Sluka because no one's going to want Sluka after what he did. McCulley, he's a receiver. I mean, I think he'll land somewhere, but honestly, I mean, Indiana was a great fit for him. Kind of an underdog story, underdog guy. I mean, I think he could have, really been able to break through the rotation later in the year if he just kept at it. But obviously him and Cignetti, maybe we're at odds. I don't know. But, I mean, Cignetti was challenging him, and maybe he just did not respond to adversity. But you're not going to be a pro player if you can't handle adversity. You have to be able to say, you know what, I'm not doing good enough. I got to do better. Absolutely got to do better. Frank saying rest in peace, Pete Rose. Absolutely. It's sad with Pete Rose. Also, Mutombo. That's sad as well in the NBA. A lot of people passing away. Unfortunate. Jackson also promoting Mark Rogers' book. Mark is going to be having a new book coming out this month. Absolutely. That is going to be awesome. Can't wait for that. You guys definitely should go check it out when it launches on the 29th. And also, like Jim said, hate seeing that during the season anywhere. Absolutely. You just don't want to see transfers like that. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's a bad look for Indiana. I don't. Because look at Sluka. He left UNLV and they're undefeated. Ranked for the first time ever even. So I don't think it's like going to really hurt Indiana's momentum in the fact that, they lost one pretty solid player. Now their whole season's wrecked. I don't see it that way. I just don't like seeing it at all. I think it's bad for college football. I get why the players are doing it. I understand why they're doing it. I don't blame McCulley. I still, appreciate everything McCulley did for Indiana. He was a fun player to watch for years. That one-handed catch he had against Illinois last year, it will be remembered for a long time. That was a fantastic catch. But, still at the end of the day, it's just, it is what it is. Him leaving, it stinks to see. It stinks with college football. And it does hurt for Indiana, even though I do think that its impact is not going to be all that bad. And again, another segue. Appreciate, again, everybody for being here. And there's the link, Indiana channel. If you guys want to watch this show in the future, it's not going to be on the main channel forever. Can't stress that enough. Not going to be on the main channel forever. So if you guys don't see it in a few weeks or next week even, and you're like, where's the Indiana show? I missed the Indiana show, which I hope you guys miss it, because I hope you guys are really enjoying the show. Absolutely. Then you guys definitely want to check it out at this link. Indiana at the voice of college football. That's where the show is going to be in the future. It's actually right now. I mean, we're live. We're simulcasting it on the Indiana channel. You can actually watch it over there right now. I mean, I appreciate, again, if you're watching on the main channel, absolutely. But the Indiana channel, it's live right now. It's up and running, and definitely would appreciate if you guys go check it out over at Indiana at the voice of college football. Definitely got a fantastic crowd tonight. Absolutely. I mean, you guys are amazing. I really appreciate it. Definitely got One Scoop John as well. John DeAdam, I still love calling you One Scoop, man. But he says, let's go, Jeffrey. Appreciate that. Absolutely. I don't even know if you're subscribed, One Scoop John. I hope definitely that you are. You might be. I definitely check, again, the Indiana channel, but really appreciate the like as well. 110%. But after the setback for Indiana with the transfers, we got to talk about Indiana Northwestern, because this is the next game on Indiana's schedule. One game at a time. Like Signetti says, 1-0. Has nothing to do with the fact Indiana's 5-0. Indiana's 40% chance to make the playoff. Like I said, we're going to get to all that stuff if Indiana keeps winning. None of that matters right now. Right now, Indiana is trying to achieve bowl eligibility. They're also trying to achieve being 6-0 for the first time since 1967, which same as 5-0 since 1967. But Indiana also went 6-0 that year. They haven't been 6-0 since. Which also, another funny stat about that is Indiana was 5-0 in 1910, then 1967, and then 2024, 57 years in distance every single time that's happened. Kind of a funny coincidence there. But Indiana Northwestern, that's going to help Indiana possibly be able to move to 6-0 and already achieve bowl eligibility, which is absolutely unreal. I mean, I still cannot believe that we're talking about Indiana possibly being undefeated at 6-0, and also we're talking about Indiana being bowl eligible already before a lot of other major teams, which is absolutely crazy. And what's also crazy too about this game is that Indiana is favored by 14. Indiana is favored by 14 points in this game on the road. I know that Ryan Field is demolished. I know that Northwestern is basically playing on like a lacrosse field. Like, there's no fans. I mean, it's abysmal for Northwestern. They're going to have a new and improved stadium, so it's not all that bad for Northwestern in the long run. I mean, they're going to have a new stadium. But for now, Northwestern, they have, a lacrosse field as their football stadium. It's not a pretty sight to see. And hopefully Indiana fans, because there's a lot of alumni in Chicago. Northwestern's in Evanston, which is a suburb of Chicago. Hopefully some Indiana alumni will show up to this game, unless Northwestern's bought all the tickets. But Northwestern's 2-2. Not like they're doing all that well. And Indiana being favored by 14 is just absolutely crazy. But we got to look at some key players, though, because this is really going to determine the game. I did this last week against Maryland, and we're going to do it again. We're going to look at Northwestern first. Northwestern, they've had two quarterbacks playing this season, and neither of them have done all that well. One of them you guys will recognize, Mike Wright. He was the former Vanderbilt quarterback. He should have stayed at Vanderbilt. He actually did pretty good there, but he transferred to Mississippi State. He didn't play. So then he goes to Northwestern. Since Ben Bryant was out of eligibility, he helped lead Northwestern to a bowl game last year. Very good season for Northwestern. But unfortunately, they're not in the West anymore. A lot tougher of a schedule for the Wildcats. But Mike Wright, he wasn't bad at Vanderbilt, but he's had a lot of problems at Northwestern, which, to be fair, Northwestern's talent's poor, which Vanderbilt's was too. But Northwestern doesn't have a lot of great talent. So Mike Wright's kind of been benched. Now they're going with Jack. I think his last name's like Loesch or Lausch, kind of an interesting last name, but their backup quarterback is now technically their starting quarterback. But I mean, his stats are kind of worse. I mean, he does have 2 touchdown passes, which Mike Wright had 0, but his completion percentage is 48%. So basically, from what I can gather here, is that Northwestern's offense is bad. It's not good. And that's kind of why when you look at the over-under for this game, it's at 41.5. When Indiana played Maryland, the over-under was at like 51. So this game, the over-under is 10 less. So I'm not, again, a betting expert. I'm not going to pretend to say I'm a betting expert, but there's a decent chance this game might go over, especially with how good Indiana's been on offense. Like, Indiana's been scoring, like, outside of the Florida International game, but that was their first game of the season. Still some rust. They only had 31 points in that game. Every other game they've had, they've scored over 40. Indiana's offense is humming. So basically, Indiana has met that over-under themselves in every single game. But Northwestern, there has to be a reason why the over-under is so low. If their offense is so bad, we know that they can't really score all that much. Their one good back is Cam Porter. Cam Porter's good. He has 3 touchdowns on the season, 5 yards a carry. That's impressive that he's got 5 yards a carry considering their offense is bad. So even though they have played a couple, not so great opponents, it's still good. I mean, they did lose to Duke, should have beat Duke. Northwestern should have beat Duke. I can't believe they lost that game. They had that game. They gave it away. My man, Mike Wright did not play all that good in that game. And Malik Murphy for Duke was horrible. He kept turning it over, but Duke found a way to win, and they're still undefeated. But you also had them losing to Washington, 24-5. Northwestern put up 5 points against Washington. It's not like Washington has a juggernaut defense. So definitely very poor for Northwestern on offense. Sure, the receivers are not all that great, considering their quarterbacks aren't. I mean, A.J. Henning's their guy. He's got 1 touchdown, 229 yards. But look at that. Everybody else is low in yards. It's probably more so that their QB plays bad versus like the receivers are just all bad. I mean, I'm sure A.J. Henning's a pretty solid receiver. I mean, putting up as many yards as he has with, basically a terrible offense. But their offense isn't good. At least their field goal kicker, he's hit all of his extra points, 6 of 9, but most of his misses are from long. But the defense, that's where Northwestern has their bread and butter. Their defense is pretty good. I'm not going to deny that their defense is pretty good. It is absolutely solid. I mean, is it one of the best in the Big Ten? I mean, you're going up against, Michigan that has studs on defense that are going to be in the NFL. You talk about Ohio State. It's got a lot of great defenders, even though, some years the defense isn't the best, but they still have talent. Penn State, pretty solid defense. So, yeah, it's not like Northwestern's defense is going to rank up with those teams. But for a team that, doesn't have a lot of NFL quality players, their defense is still pretty solid. It's just with Northwestern, if their offense is so bad that they can't really score that much, it doesn't really matter how good their defense is. That's why they lost to Washington 24-5. And Washington just lost to Rutgers. Now, Rutgers is a lot better. I'm not saying losing to Rutgers is shameful like it would have been under the Chris Ash era, but I'm just saying that Washington lost to Rutgers. Northwestern only put up 5 against Washington. So Northwestern offensively is horrible. They are a bad offensive team, and their defense gets tired, and that's unfortunate. And they don't have a home crowd either. They just don't because it's small. Like, it's a lacrosse field. It only holds like 11,000 people. So, or whatever, maybe 12,000 at the max. And there might be some Indiana fans there. So, the crowd, I mean, it's going to be interesting just to see how both teams play. Like, I want to see how it looks because, honestly, I've not watched Northwestern really play outside of highlights this year. I haven't watched them, but it just looks weird seeing them playing on this lacrosse field. It just looks wrong. It just does not look right in any way, shape, or form. So, definitely Northwestern. You see some standout defenders, Xander Mueller, Devin Turner, Darren Johnson. They got some good players. I mean, these guys, maybe a couple of them might be playing on Sundays. They're pretty solid. But then you go over to Indiana. Keep in mind that when you saw Northwestern, right? You saw Northwestern, their 2 quarterbacks combined for 634 yards. Grant, they have only played in 4 games. But then you go over to Indiana. Look at these offensive numbers. And yeah, Indiana hasn't played the best teams in the world. I understand that. But still, look at these stats. Curtis Rourke, 1,372 passing yards already. 11 touchdowns, 2 picks. Both those picks were against Maryland. But he's still putting up great stats. He's in the Heisman running. Like, he's way down the list, but he's in the Heisman running. So he's having a great year for Indiana. Curtis Rourke, just Indiana needs to protect him. Not let Northwestern's defense get him on the ground. Do not let him get rattled. Rourke got a little rattled against Maryland a couple times, but he settled into the game, still threw for almost 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 picks. He got it together, still had a good game. Then Indiana's rushing attack. Look at this. Justice Ellison and Tyson Lawton, both of Indiana's top 2 backs, have more yards than Northwestern's top back. That's good. Really, really good. And they are rushing for a whole lot of touchdowns. 5 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns. Indiana's been great on the ground. Elijah Green, Kalen Black. Kalen Black did have the fumble last week against Maryland. But other than that fumble, Indiana's running backs have been flawless, playing great football. All 4 of them, and all 4 of them are good in different ways. Some are better at pass blocking. Some are better at, being like a speedster, can get down the field. Walton's kind of a big power back, but then like Kalen Black, Elijah Green, they're quicker. So Indiana's got a plethora of solid running backs. It's going to be interesting with Northwestern's defense. I'm not overlooking Northwestern defense. They're not a slouch. But Indiana's offense is really good. They're going to have to do a really good job against Indiana. Northwestern probably playing the toughest offense they've played so far. And then you look at Elijah Surratt, almost 400 receiving yards. He's been great. Omar Cooper, 328. Miles Price, 246. Miles Cross, 184. And Zach Courtney, he's only got 85 receiving yards to tight end, but he's a fantastic blocker. He might be playing on Sundays. And then all the way down here, Donovan McCulley, only 21 receiving yards, and he just entered the portal. So, again, not that big a deal. As long as these receivers stay healthy, they've been great. Radicic, the kicker for Indiana, hasn't missed anything. No extra points, no field goals. Hasn't even had to kick many field goals because they've been so great on offense. And then look at these stats. As good as Northwestern's defense has been, Indiana's has been good too. Aiden Fisher already has 50 total tackles. He's on pace to get like 130 or 140 tackles this year. Like if Indiana ends up making a bowl game, plays in 13 games, because like right now they played 5, so 10 would get him to 100 tackles if he keeps up this level. Obviously, tougher opponents might not have as many tackles, but Aiden Fisher, great transfer from James Madison. Then Jalen Walker, 31 tackles. Sean Asbury, 28 tackles. D'Angelo Ponce, he's going to be in the NFL. He's good. Really good cover corner, 23 total tackles. Indiana, a really solid defense. And I feel like with how well Indiana's offense has been playing, the defense is kind of getting overlooked. It is. Like, you're talking about the fact that, yeah, they gave up 28 to Maryland, but as I said earlier, there was a couple breaks Maryland got that even allowed them to score 28. They really probably only should have had 14. So Indiana's defense has been good, like really good. That's why Hummus Hero, you pointed out earlier that Indiana's top 5 in offense and defense. So as good as their offense has been, and that's getting all the attention, their defense is really good too. That's what Indiana hasn't had until this year with Cignetti. Under Kevin Wilson, they were a great offensive team. Terrible defensive team. I mean, they were really bad on defense. They were losing games 54-50. I mean, just trash defense. But their offense was great. All those great players they had. Then under Tom Allen, most years their defense was better. And then they had Penix that made it kind of both for brief, really brief. And then after that, their offense just was horrible. Defense was all right. Now they got a legit offense and a legit defense. And that's how you are a legit team. You have to be good on both sides of the ball. Not what Iowa does, where, their defense is elite, offense is terrible. Or USC, UNC, LSU lately, where their defense is bad, offense is great. You got to be good on both sides of the ball. And I believe Indiana's great on both sides of the ball. So who do I think is going to win? What is my final score prediction for Indiana Northwestern? I believe that Northwestern, with their defense, is going to make Indiana score less. I do. I think Indiana, they're not going to get into the 40s. If they do, I would be shocked if they do. I mean, that would mean that they're like really rolling. Like they've learned from the mistakes last week and they're just lightning in a bottle. They're just continuing this historic season so far and they're playing great. But I don't think they're going to get into the 40s. I don't. I think that Northwestern's defense is good enough. It's going to give Indiana some tests. It's on the road too. Small environment, but it's on the road. Still going to be interesting there. So I think Indiana is going to struggle to score at first. I think they're going to get it figured out by the second half. The key in this game is, can Northwestern score? That's the key of this game. Can Northwestern score? Because if they do what they did against Washington, if they only put up 5 points, yeah, they're not beating Indiana. Indiana's not going to score less than that. So, yeah, Northwestern's going to have to at least get in the 20s, in my opinion, to win on offense. They got to get into the 20s. Maybe if they can get a turnover. That's why their defense is so important, too. If their defense can force Indiana to make a mistake, pick 6. Maybe if they can get work to do a pick 6. Maybe if they can get a fumble recovery or 2 in this game, like Maryland did. Maybe Northwestern can capitalize on it, get good field position, kick some field goals. Or, get some easy points that way. Like close field, maybe they can score a touchdown. Because Northwestern, they got decent players. They're not completely horrible. They just don't have enough good players. That's the problem. Just not enough good players. But I think Northwestern's offense, if Indiana's defense is not sharp like they've been lately and they allow Northwestern to score some points, it could be interesting. But at the end of the day, I just think Northwestern's offense is too bad. And I think that even though their defense is good, I think Indiana's too good offensively. They're too disciplined. Cignetti's not going to allow them to get with the rat poison. You're not going to let the fact that they're ranked get to them. Like, oh, we're ranked now, we're going to overlook Northwestern. Not going to do that. Indiana's favored by 14. Like Indiana's favored big. Maybe they'll overlook Northwestern. I don't think Indiana's at that point. They're not a juggernaut of a program yet, where they've been winning for 3 or 4 years under Cignetti, where they could overlook a team like this. I just don't see it. They're still really high right now. They're on an emotional high. They're going to continue to be hungry, and Cignetti's that type of coach. He's going to get them playing hard, playing well. I think Indiana's going to win this game 28-14. I think that the spread's right. I think 14 works. I think Indiana's going to win by 14. And I think this game's barely going to go over. Again, I'm not a betting expert, so you don't want to take my betting advice or anything. If you want the betting advice, You saw the ad earlier in the stream. Mark Rogers, Steve Merrill, they're the experts with the betting odds and stuff like that. I'm not a betting expert, but I do believe that Indiana and Northwestern will barely go over because of Indiana's offense. I think Indiana's offense will do just enough to get over that mark, and I do believe that they're going to basically be right on that line. Whether that line goes under or over 14 is going to determine whether they cover or not, but I do think basically Indiana has covered every game except Florida International, and that was the first game of the year. So I think they're basically going to cover in this game as well. I believe in Indiana. I believe in the way that they're playing. I mean, I'm so thrilled and excited with the way that Indiana's been playing. I mean, I know that for some people, they don't believe in them yet. And no, I don't think Indiana's a top 10 team just because they're top 5 statistically in offense and defense. I just don't think that. I really, really don't. I think that they're a top 20 team. Maybe top 15 is a stretch. They don't have the talent to be that. They don't have that good of a team talent-wise, but it's the coach. It's Cignetti. It's just this perfect blend of players. It's going to be interesting because Rourke's gone after this year. A lot of these players are going to be gone. Can Cignetti do it again? I think as long as he stays in Indiana, they're always going to be a solid team, but I just don't see them overlooking a team like this. In previous seasons, I would. I'd be really nervous for Indiana, but I'm not. That Maryland game really showed that Indiana is just not going to overlook teams like that. I just don't see it. I really, really don't. But we got a couple super chats. Before we get out of here, we're going to have some final thoughts, and definitely with these super chats, really appreciate it. We got Jeff for $10 saying, great job tonight as always, Jeffrey. Great show. Keep up the great work. Absolutely appreciate it. Definitely helps out the channel. Absolutely. And I'm glad you enjoyed the show. I mean, that's what we're here for. You know, whether Indiana's winning or losing or, you know, any other team that you like winning or losing, college football is just so fun to talk about. Absolutely. Love talking college football, and really, again, appreciate the opportunity to do this show. It's just, it's a lot of fun. I appreciate you guys a lot. And we got Jackson coming in for 10 saying, coming on the October 29th, 2024 is the exciting new book by Mark Rogers himself, Speed of National Champions, College Football's Historical 1990s, Reset, written. You know, all that kind of stuff. You got the link there. It's going to be coming out soon. It's going to be a lot of fun. We got Doc P saying, can you go over their upcoming schedule? We can do that. Absolutely, we can do that before I end the stream. Absolutely. So, I mean, I'm not going to be, you know, even close to predicting these games or any of that kind of stuff because, I mean, that's just way too premature. But, I mean, you look at Indiana's schedule. Definitely try to get that up real quick. Just came off the screen. We'll get it back on there. So Indiana started out with the FIU win, Western Illinois, UCLA, Charlotte, and Maryland, then Northwestern. I'm picking them to win that game. And then they got a bye. After that, things get tougher. So you got Nebraska. It's a big game. Indiana needs to sell out that game, have a homecoming, massive, you know, game right there. Indiana struggled in homecomings recently. They really have. I think that this game right here, they need to go out there and show that, hey, Nebraska, they're the brand team. They've struggled a lot recently, but they're on the rise again. They need to show up, show out. Those fans do, and that's going to be a very big game for Indiana. If Indiana's going to have any shot to be a playoff team, that's the game right there. You got to win that one. Then you got Washington. That's a big letdown game, especially if Nebraska, if they can beat Nebraska, oh boy, you got Washington. Not an easy game. I know Washington's not as good, but they're still a decent team. Still got Will Rogers, Jed Fish, solid team. So that's a game to circle too. Then at Michigan State, I mean, see, these are the tougher games. Indiana can win all these games. I believe with Cignetti, they could win all these games. Will they? I don't know. Going to be interesting. I can't wait for that Nebraska game, though. It's going to be so good. But at Michigan State, can't slouch on them either because you got Childs, you got Jonathan Smith. He's very turnover-prone, Childs is, but they're not bad, and they beat Maryland, so can't overlook them. And then you got Michigan. Everybody's saying Indiana's got a shot against Michigan because their offense is worse, but Michigan's still Michigan. Still a tough team to play. Not going to be easy to win that game. And then you got at Ohio State. And Steven, I see you right there. I see you with those eyes. I mean, I'm not saying Indiana's going to have a shot against Ohio State, but it'd be cool if they could keep it close. Indiana still hasn't beaten them since 1988. So it'd be huge for Indiana if they could win. First win in 36 years. It'd be crazy if they could win. But yeah, I'm not counting on that. But maybe Indiana can keep it close. Then you got Purdue. I mean, obviously, right now, Indiana is favored probably to beat every one of these teams. I think according to the FBI, they're favored to beat everybody but maybe Ohio State. They might even be favored against Michigan. I think they are slightly favored against Michigan, which obviously if they drop a game to Nebraska or Michigan State or Washington or whatever, even Northwestern, they're not going to be favored against Michigan in the FBI. But right now, they're favored to beat Michigan in the FBI, which is insane. And hopefully, as Jim says right here, the Oak and Bucket will be a win. Indiana hasn't beaten Purdue since 2019. Got to make that happen. That double overtime game with Peyton Ramsey, that was such a good game, but Indiana should have beat them by more. I mean, they were a lot better team that year. They struggled with them. Indiana just has not been good against Purdue. Cignetti, I think he's going to change that. He said Purdue sucks. So does Michigan and Ohio State. I mean, maybe he's a bit bullish on that. Michigan's possible, but Ohio State will be tough. But Stephen Cherry's not impressed with Indiana. I agree. 100%. Hummus Hero says 31-10 IU. Doc P says 34-10 Hoosiers. So, I mean, all you guys are really, really high on Indiana as well, which is crazy. That's the thing. Like, it's so crazy that people, besides me, I'm the Indiana guys, everybody says, right? There's not a lot of people that talk about Indiana football. Other people are on board. Legitimately, like you guys would never have picked Indiana to win these type of games before. I'm excited. Their schedule's tough down the stretch, but there's a shot they go 10-2. Do they make the playoffs? That'd be crazy. I'm not there. Can't wait to hopefully be talking about segments like that later on down the season. You know, like if they're like 8-0, we'll be talking about it then. That's going to be fun, but we're definitely not there yet. Will and D saying it's a high school stadium. Appreciate you for stopping by, Will and D. Absolutely. But yeah, it's not a great stadium. And yes, that Bama win, what a win that was. Absolutely. It was a bunch of fun. And if you guys want coverage of that, Alabama at the Voice of College Football, definitely can go check that out as well. So many channels. There's more on the way at the Voice of College Football. A lot of more channels are on the way. But again, appreciate everybody for being here tonight. It's been a blast of a show. Great crowd tonight. I really appreciate you guys for showing up on the main channel, but I can't stress enough. You guys definitely got to check out Indiana at the Voice of College Football because, like I said, eventually the show will not be on the main channel, and I do not want you guys to miss it. If you guys enjoyed the show tonight, which I really believe y'all did, I really appreciate it. You guys seem very pumped in the chat, and I can't appreciate it enough. But if you guys want to see this show in the future, because eventually it's not going to be on the main channel, you want to check out Indiana at the Voice of College Football. And you guys have been doing a great job supporting it. We're at 33 subs right now. If you guys go check out that link right there, then we can get it to 50, 100, and beyond. Definitely keep building it. We're going to have videos on the way. You know, more content's coming on the Indiana channel. But I really appreciate you guys for stopping by. It's been a blast. And definitely the super chats from Jackson and Jeff. I mean, absolutely helps the channel. It helps the show a lot. Definitely appreciate it. Stephen Cherry says, I hope Indiana can afford to keep Cignetti around the big boys come calling. They will. And that's another thing we're going to be talking about. A lot of these segments, you guys are talking about great segments that we're going to be having later on throughout the year. Absolutely. I mean, in the offseason, we're going to be having, more coverage of that. Like, is Cignetti going to get poached? Do not go to Florida, Cignetti. Just don't. Like, if you're going to go anywhere, just don't go to Florida. Absolutely not. But I think Indiana's going to pay him. Jem says need to extend the contract for season's end. I agree. I think they do. I hope they do. Because Indiana, I mean, they've lost for so long. But now you got the Big Ten money. You got the Big Ten money, Big Ten media deal. It's the biggest in college football. It won't be forever, but it is right now. You got to take advantage of that. You got the money. You've got so many boosters in Indiana. Pay the man. Do not let Cignetti leave. Do not let him leave. He's done such a great job. And Indiana's one win away from bowl eligibility. They're ranked. All these other records are broken. They could go 10-2, maybe make the playoff possibly. It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. It's all thanks to Cignetti. And I'm so glad you guys are all on board. Appreciate it, Doc P, DDR256, Will, Hummus Hero, Jims, and Steven. All you guys for being here tonight. I appreciate it a whole lot. And the super chats. It's been a fantastic show. But we're going to be back next Tuesday. Don't know for sure if it's going to be on the main channel or just on the Indiana channel or even the Big Ten channel. But we'll get all that worked out. Definitely let you guys know when it's going to be back. It's going to be next Tuesday at 7. And hopefully we got a good report that Indiana is now bowl eligible and they're moving up in the rankings and that they're 6-0 for the first time since 1967. But if they don't win, we'll be here for that too. It'd be a little bit disappointing, but still wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I think Indiana could still get it turned around even if they lost. But I believe in Cignetti, man. I believe in Cignetti. I don't think he's going to let that happen. But definitely appreciate it, guys. Go sub to Indiana at the Voice of College Football and check out the other channels at the Voice of College Football as well. There's going to be more channels on the way. Definitely appreciate it. Like the stream down below. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, the main channel and the Indiana channel. And share the stream to social media. Share it to other Indiana fans. Share it to other college football fans. You got to let them know. You got to let them know we're here pumping out content week in and week out. And also check me out too. Can't stress enough. Check me out at Only Talk Sports. That's where you can find all my other content. I do content on college basketball, college football, NFL, and NBA. I think Jackson's put that link in the chat earlier as well. I'm on YouTube. I'm on Twitter. Definitely go check out my YouTube channel, Only Talk Sports. Would really appreciate that a lot as well. Me and Will and D actually tonight are going to be doing a live stream talking about all the college football games. So got content coming there, but the Indiana channel is definitely the place to be for Indiana content. Appreciate you guys for being here tonight. And hopefully Indiana 6-0 when we start talking about the Hoosiers again next Tuesday. It's going to be a lot of fun. Go Hoosiers, everybody.